Hello everyone and welcome back to Complicated Relationships Reddit Stories. Hope you guys are safe and healthy. Now let's see what the story is about today. In today's story, OP says, discovered my wife's other man on the day she was admitted into the hospital. My ex and I met in our mid-20s. It was through a mutual friend at a barbecue. At first, she seemed almost too good to be true. Not only she was incredibly beautiful, but she was also shy and introverted. It took a while for us to officially date, but once it happened, I was over the moon. When we first tried to get intimate, she suddenly started crying. I was worried and thought it was something I did, but she apologized the next day and told me that 2 years before meeting me, she was in a long-term relationship and that guy was cruel both emotionally and physically as well as mentally. He would degrade her during their moments of intimacy and then apologizes afterwards. She had a flashback but reassured me it had nothing to do with me, so we took things slow as she was still in therapy. It was tough, but because I loved her, I believed once we got over this, it would make our relationship stronger. And for a while, it honestly appeared that way. Fast forward another year and we have gotten engaged. I was fortunate enough to buy a house for us, courtesy of inheritance from my late uncle. Things were going great and I half seriously suggested we plant a peach tree to signify new beginnings, and she was all for it. We were wedded not long after, and quite frankly, it was absolutely amazing. Of course, we had our normal ups and downs like every married couple, but I considered us luckier because she always made a point to never go to bed upset with each other, and she would always point out gently if I did anything to upset her. Sometime later, life basically happened and I was promoted at my job, and it meant more pay, but it also meant that I would be traveling more for work conferences and business meetings. I have noticed that she'd been getting down a lot more and wasn't being as intimate as before, and she would keep her phone close to her. I tried to talk to her about it, but she assured me that she was fine and this is a phase that she is going through, and having no reason not to trust her, I let it go. She would sometimes go to her sister's place to spend the night, telling me that she just needed a bit of girl time with her sister. One day, when she said that she was at her sister's, I got a phone call from her sister telling me to come to the hospital immediately. I will never forget the sound of my ex-sister-in-law's voice as she kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over on the phone while I was driving home from a week-long business trip. I was confused and had absolutely no idea what she meant, but only after I managed to calm her down, she informed me that my wife was in the hospital and to hurry. I remember rushing into the hospital, barely breathing and frantically asking about my wife when an understanding and patient police officer sat me down to explain what happened. He said that he is a friend of my sister-in-law and he happened to respond to a domestic disturbance call. He arrived on the scene to find out a couple fighting. The supposed boyfriend was on top of the female and was punching her, and she was screaming. This did not make any sense to me because, number one, this had nothing to do with my wife as we were married. Number two, everyone who knew my wife knew she wouldn't do that. He gave me a knowing look and placed his hand on my shoulder and told me to be very calm because said girlfriend was actually my wife. If it weren't for the intensity of the situation, I would have laughed in his face, but something in the way he said made me believe him. I was then ushered by a nurse to see my wife, and what greeted me to this day is I still can hardly find the words to describe it. I just stood there for what seemed like an eternity. Then a doctor came and explained her injuries to me. The jaw was slightly fractured, her left eye was completely swollen shut and had massive bruising covering half of her face as well as 3 broken ribs. Then the doctor dropped another big one and told me that she was pregnant. I still couldn't understand how this happened, and then I caught sight of her sister. She at first tried to avoid me, but at the persuasion of a police officer friend, she told me what she knew. It turns out my wife's ex had gotten contact with her 5 months ago, and he was doing this redemption pyramid thing where he apologized to the people he wronged in order to clear his karma. They began talking more. Then he convinced her to meet up for coffee to show her that he was a changed man. Obviously, old feelings came back, coupled with the fact that he appeared a changed man, and it soon developed into an EA. My wife approached her sister for advice, who told her to take things slow and just get it out of her system if she needed to, which led to a physical affair 3 months later. She actually told my wife that she should at least make peace with her ex in whatever form it may be, and even offered to cover for my wife once in a while. My sister-in-law was in tears at this point and kept apologizing to me, saying that she did not know about the mistreat, as my wife never told anyone other than the therapist at the time. I was numb. I just couldn't feel anything, and I was absolutely dumbfounded of my wife's actions. When my wife finally woke up, I was there and she burst into tears. I spent the following months in zombie flight mode. There was individual counseling for her and marriage counseling for us. In counseling, she was surprisingly forthcoming about how it happened, and she absolutely hated herself for causing me pain. She mentioned at one point on her way home from his place, she actually fantasized about driving into the river. She said it was because she smelled like him and didn't want his scent to corrupt me. She said she tried to end it, but she was too weak, and only after learning that she was pregnant that it actually woke her up and made her realize that any further contact with this man was dangerous to not only her but the unborn child as well. When she went to see him to end things for good, he snapped on her. She became a shell of herself and developed a phobia for any other males but me. At one point, she couldn't even use the bathroom at night unless I was holding her hand. After the baby was born, we got a paternity test and he was mine. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized that I did not hate my wife. I actually loathed her. I couldn't see the woman I married, but instead I saw his leftovers each time I looked at her. I decided to leave because I was afraid I would do something that I regret and be exactly like her ex. She begged me not to leave and even made a ridiculous offer by giving me a hall pass as well as slapping her if I want to. I knew at this point that I had to get out. She was very generous during the divorce, moved back into her parents' house, and signed a very well thought out co-parenting plan. Moving forward 3 years later, and I meet my now fiancé by chance in a bookstore. When this beautiful lady approached me to correct my pronunciations of Egyptian gods and cities, I was impressed, not only her understanding, but also by the fact that she is Egyptian herself. She gave me her number and eventually we started dating. When I finally proposed to her, it was actually in front of the peach tree I had planted years ago. I got down on one knee, but before I got my answer, she ran into the house and came out with a ring as well. Turns out, she was actually planning on proposing herself because she was madly in love with me and just didn't want any other woman to have me. My son, in all his childlike innocence, told his mother what happened because he was present when this happened. My ex showed up that night in the rain, yelling about how I could propose to her in front of our tree and that this is not the end of us. Thanks for listening so far. We have the update coming up. But before that, please like the video so this video will reach more and more beautiful people like you. Here is the update. My son's birthday was coming up and he told us that he wanted a camp night for it. Due to the ongoing situation, we cannot go to our usual spots, so I offered my backyard for it. Another request he had was for my ex to sleep over as well. He wanted to imitate a scene from one of his kid adventure shows with both parents sitting with the child and roasting marshmallows on the campfire. I had absolutely no intentions of denying my son's birthday wishes, but at the same time, I couldn't have my ex sleep in the same tent with me and my son. It would be disrespectful to my fiancé. Even though she said she understood, it was clear she wasn't okay with it. My ex seemed to take advantage of this and kept saying how much she was looking forward to spending the night with her two men. She was certainly trying to rub it in my fiancé's face. During the birthday celebration, my son happily sat between us, roasting his marshmallows. What I didn't expect was, after we were done taking pictures and making s'mores, he handed my fiancée a stick and marshmallows as well and sat next to her to make his second s'more. It is honestly a mystery how something this pure and perfect could come out of an absolute mess. My ex asked me for a bit of my time, to which I obliged. We stepped into the kitchen and she apologized for her behavior on the day I proposed, but not for her actions following that. She told me that she still sees me as her husband and the thought of giving my heart to another terrified her. She said she never wanted to cause me pain and would give anything to go back in time and undo her mistakes. She mentioned how happy she was when the paternity test showed that I was the father because she thought it was a new beginning for us and that he was proof of our love. I thanked her for the courage to share all this, but told her I was happy where I am. Then she said she meant what she told me on the day we divorced and she will wait for me. I left the kitchen exhausted because none of what I was trying to say got through to her. We decided to call it a night and my fiancé and I slept in one tent and my ex and my son in the other. All in all, it was a good birthday for my son, but not so good night for me. Please like, comment and share the story if you enjoyed it. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when we upload the next video. Take care.